Thanks be to God.
The language of water in the Bible is an interesting subject. It's the most common symbolic usage of water is linked with Jesus. Jesus is the living water. We receive baptism by water. And then we also see the stories about the flood, the splitting of the Red Seas, the water from the rock struck by Moses' staff, Jacob's well. The element of water is frequently employed to display God's power, judgment, deliverance, provision, and life. The physical relationship that we have with actual substance, H2O water, reflects the spiritual and divine reality that we have with Christ. We cannot survive without it. We cannot survive within or against it. Water always wins. If we go feel like the Vikings, we tell ourselves that we tame seas. And with the proud boasting, but what we really mean is that we barely managed to survive and cross it, is actually what we mean. The language of water and oceans is a popular and frequent symbolic narrative used to express God's movement in human reality because it's one of the biggest entities in physical reality that we can actually encounter. It's the entity also, it's the domain where we are overwhelmed, something that we cannot truly withstand, but still where we find sources of life. We get water, we get salt, fish, even air. The oxygen we breathe mostly comes from the ocean. Water is a very fluid language throughout the Bible, and it's powerful and also a bit tricky. When I was a kid, I was reading Genesis, and I noticed in verse 2, before creation, before the let there be light, there was God, Spirit of God, the uncreated Creator alone, hovering over the waters. The Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 says, "Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." It always freaked me out. So there was an elemental substance before creation. Water was there before the light. Now, being the poetic and somewhat smart of a kid, a kid at PK, I came up with a logical conclusion. Water, as in living water, before creation. Oh, this must be Jesus. Wasn't that reasonable? Yeah, kind of adorable. Thank goodness you guys agree with me. Of course, it's an incorrect interpretation. In ancient mythological literature, especially surrounding the Fertile Crescent area, now roughly known as Middle East, sort of, a lot of ancient civilizations used the word water, the image and the sense of water to describe formlessness, the lack of form, lack of order. In a modern sentiment, the closest synonym would be chaos. But the Greeks really didn't invent the concept of chaos back then. It was way before the Greeks. Water was a state of chaos, formlessness, and lack of order and pattern. A deep abyss of shapelessness and potentiality, where life form and order had come from, arose from in ancient literatures. In many mythologies, actually, there would be some sort of a god or a demigod, a figure of light that sort of spontaneously arises from the waters, and who would actually also fish out or raise other parts of the creation, such as land. Have you guys seen Disney movie called Moana? Yeah, Moana. Yeah. There, if you actually carefully listen to the songs sang by Maui, voiced by Rock, he actually talks about how he fished up islands from the sea. In ancient Egypt, apparently Ra arose from the ocean when there was nothing but the ocean, and he also sort of used a virtual method to arise pyramids and lands. Don't look at what he actually did. Judeo-Christian Genesis, especially in the sense that even light and water is part of the creation, where the order and form comes from God, not fish or raised from chaos. Many ancient mythologies believe what the atheists believe today. Something came out of nothing. Order came from orderlessness. Form came from formlessness. In the Bible, water and its shapeless, formlessness, and potential, being in state of the deep chaos and the source of life force, was frequently employed to only express God's cosmic power and character. And if you trace the language of water throughout the Bible, what you notice is that it begins, well, I guess it begins in the Genesis where it's part of a creation. But its employment in the expression of God's interaction with the world begins from very negative side and then moves towards the positive and slightly separate. The biggest event we see in Genesis is the flood, the great cosmic wrath of God against the corruption of the world. And then in the Exodus, Red Sea is the last trap, the last blockage that prisons the people of Israel from their freedom. But alongside, there's also a constant provision of life expressed by water. There's the Jacob's well, there's the Moses' rock, provision of rock, finding of the rivers and ponds. Even when King Ahab rebelled against God in idolatry, worshiping Baal, God's wrath came in the form of the absence of water. And by Jonah's point, water becomes the medium of an intermingled form of grace and punishment, a medium of discipline and transformation. As water shifts its usage in the expression of God, its relationship with the people of God also shifts little by little, and is completed with Christ. In today's passage, the story goes, the Lord sent the disciples ahead in a boat to cross the waters, the chaos and formlessness. The storm struck them, and all they had to keep themselves alive was a tiny boat made by human hands. The boat, the instrument made and used and mastered by men to survive chaos, was weak and fragile. It didn't really help them. Keep them afloat in time of peace, when things were calm. But once the chaos roared to devour them, it was vain and pointless. And this isn't some primitive raft that amateurs sort of tied together out of desperation. There were at least 4 professional sailors among the disciples, the fishermen, if not more. And their leader, Peter, was also an experienced fisherman. His profession, experience, and skills were supposed to lead the whole group to safety across the waters. And yet, when the storm struck, they were all hopeless and doomed. This image, for Christians, it's a life in a nutshell. We are sent to the voyage of life. We have to cross the waters to go to the other side where Christ points out. But the chaos and the formlessness and the swirl and the storm comes at us. The boat of our own making, our experiences and skills, is supposed to keep us alive, is helpless against it. And when we were stranded and doomed, helpless, it was Jesus who came to us to save us. The Lord who hovers over the waters as he did before creation came to us. Jesus stood and walked above the chaos in this world. And as the Father commanded light into existence, the Son came to us as a light of the world and commanded courage. In today's passage, we witness the living Christ, the Lord who came and stays with us in the midst of the storm of life. As it is a theme of the first month of this year, we must seek to see clearly. We must seek to see Christ in this confusing vortex of storm and chaos. Because he's the light of the world, the great bridge maker, the king who can actually tame and command the seas. Here's the trouble. It's not always possible to see clearly. The storm, it can be stormy, it can be misty, it could be just nighttime dark. Often it's impossible to see anything clearly. And when the storm hits in the middle of the night, it's an absolute terror. You can't tell where you are. You can barely tell up from down, let alone where to go. Not that you could go even if you knew. So when a human figure, this faint human figure appears and approaches you, it should terrify you as it did for the disciples. And there's actually a common fear of human figures standing upright in the context of water, in many civilizations, is a very intuitive and superstitious but intuitive wisdom to fear a human figure standing upright in waters. Because there's actually a scientific reason to this. Whenever there's a dead body in the water standing upright, it means that there's a vortex, like a swirling vortex happening within the water. People fear the water for being haunted, seeing those bodies as ghosts and demons. Rikishi in Korean words. Because whenever people try to approach those figures, they will get sucked in, powerless to swim out of it. And this odd and haunting physical reality reflects our spiritual reality. When there seems to be a figure that seems fully adapted to the chaos of the world, to the formlessness, to the evil of it, it is wise to be afraid of them and move away, than blindly trust. There are false prophets and charismatic warmongers, or boasting materialists, worshippers of money, or hypocrites who scream love and peace, but they just want control over other people. They are the ghosts of the watery chaos, the standing dead, that will pull you down with them if you follow them blindly. You may think, should we save these people? No, I'm sorry, but it's hard to say it like this, but you need to humble yourself and know your place. It is Christ who saves, never you. Just because you see a figure in the midst of the dark storm doesn't mean you should follow it. It should be there as a warning. They couldn't see clearly and recognize Jesus properly, so they were in their confusion. So they were just afraid. So how do you tell Jesus apart from the ghosts? How do you tell Savior apart from the standing dead? Peter in today's message gives us a perfect example. Peter isn't exactly the calm, analytic type. His heart, spontaneous, fiery, he's a fighter. Jesus literally named him Rock. So that should be that giveaway. In Korea, Rock, if you call someone Rock, it means they're stupid. So can you imagine? So Sunday school in Korea was a bit of a huh? Thanks to French. Oh. So yeah, Sunday school back in Korea and back in France probably has some confusing idea why Jesus appointed Rock as the leader of the disciples. And this is actually before Pentecost, so he's more of a strike hard and think later kind of guy. It's not the Peter that we know after Pentecost. But even Peter, being the experienced fisherman, sailor, knew the dangers of the waters. And though he probably lacked scientific explanations of why he should stay away from a standing upright figure in the midst of a storm, his experience and intuition as a fisherman knew better than to simply follow. But he too was still helpless and paralyzed in the storm. But when Jesus shouted them to take courage, Peter faintly recognized the voice and tried to figure out if it was truly Christ. So he responded with a courageous call. Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on water. The call of courage was answered by call of courage. For Christians, when we are asked to take courage, we must answer with a call for invitation to courage, seeking divine command into courage. Thinking that you can just be courageous on your own is just stupid, actually. If you just jump and throw yourself into the chaos and fall out of your own pride and confidence or self-righteousness, that's not faithfulness. That's just self-idolatry and suicide. In fact, that's exactly how the devil tried to tempt Jesus, by telling him to jump on the top of the temple, test God by holding yourself hostage. Look carefully. We have to study carefully how Peter responds in this desperate moment. Lord, if it is you, command me. If there's one thing you must learn from the storm and chaos of the world, it's humility. You don't command and tame the waters. It's not your courage that makes the impossible possible. You don't command the king and demand for salvation. Never make the mistake of thinking that you can hold leverage against God by holding yourself hostage. This is a fatal mistake that's tragically too common, both in and outside the church. When Jesus called you to be courageous against the storm and the chaos of the world, you don't tell the King of Kings, if it's you, stop the storm for my need. Bend the heavens and oceans for my ease. That's not how you approach it. You have to be both humble and bold. And this seemingly paradoxical behavior, Peter gives a perfect example. You cry out for the command. You ask for the command. Lord, if it is you, command me to come to the waters. Command the impossible. Command me to stand above the darkness and the demons and the chaos. And when Christ finally reveals himself in the midst of the storm by the command, when Jesus calls you to come, only then you jump in. Only then it is no longer suicidal madness to attempt to march across the tempest. And the impossible happens. Peter, the rock, walks above the waters as he slowly steps towards Jesus. The name Peter means rock, as I've said. Rocks are not supposed to float. Rocks are meant to be sank. They don't float. It's natural for rocks to sink in water. It's natural for humans to be devoured by the chaos. It's natural for humanity to be doomed by the weight of their sins and pulled and trapped in the abyss, unable to approach their life. But in the command of Christ, the impossible becomes possible. By the command of the Creator, the one who wrote and declared the order and patterns of the world, you can do the impossible. Rock walked on water. A man stood above the abyssal chaos as he followed the King of Kings. This is a divine reality given to us by Jesus Christ. Wait, I forgot to tell the slides. This was next slide, please. When things are too chaotic and blurry, you shout to the King to command you to stand above the waters. And in God's command, you become the impossible made possible, and you walk. So are we done? You wish. Not really. Sailing isn't exactly over. The storm is still roaring, and the life continues. The voyage is still there to be done. And even as you walk towards Christ, fear and doubt can still overwhelm you as it did for Peter. Old habits die hard, and bad habits are practically zombies. It's really annoying. As we see in today's passage, the storm often pulls us with fear and doubt. And when it does, we sink again. The old nature, old impossible returns. And like any rock, we begin to sink again. When our faith wavers, we sink. When our obedience in the command wavers, the water pulls us back. But that's the point where the grace of God is most visible. Jesus, the figure who was too far away in the stormy dark, is now directly above. Because you submitted yourself under the command of Christ, now he's directly above. By seeking and submitting yourself under Jesus' command, the Lord is now within your sight, and the Lord reveals himself in clarity to those who take their leap into faith and stretches his saving hand beyond the waters. There you will see the saving hand of Christ. You must remember, the need to see clearly is obvious, even to the worldly philosophers. Everybody sees the need to see clearly, see things clearly. But the clarity to see what exactly is a trick question. What must one see clearly? The world? There's nothing clear about the world, at least for us to see. The world is noise. It's water, it's waves, it's storm and dust, mist and darkness. When you try to see clearly, when you seek to see clearly, you must know what you should be seeking to see. Make sure it is Jesus and nothing else. Because when the water pulls you into the abyss and pulls you with frightening force, you cannot swim out of it. Every year there's always the unfortunate souls die in the waters. And it's always those who are too confident in their ability to swim, thinking that they can outswim the currents. Only the hand of Christ can truly pull you up and enable you to walk again. Christ, the King who came into your chaotic reality, is the one you need to seek and reach out for. Only in his accompanying presence will you walk above the waters, despite your wavering heart, afraid and doubtful. And as he did for Peter, Jesus will walk with you and take you back into your boat. Your life, your experience, your work, your skills. Jesus will walk you back into your reality. And when Jesus enters your boat, then the wind stops. Then the storm is tamed and water is silenced. And when that happens, you face the moment of truth. When the Son of God enters your boat, takes you, saves you, puts you back, and enters your boat, you have to confess, truly you're the Son of God. This may seem like an obvious thing to do, right? That's because it is. But tranquility plus human stupidity is impossible to be. There will always be that ideal, that ridiculous pride. When things seem okay, when things seem calm, people are quick to think that their old ways, their old methods, and their skills are now working again. You think, they tell themselves, finally my boat is working. Finally it's sailable again. Things are back to normal. When Jesus enters your reality, the waters are put down by the command of the King. The storms are calm, and in that tranquility, it's really easy to fool yourself into thinking that it's the boat that saved them. It's that my contribution, they say this church that upholds the worship, that I am doing things. It's my craftsmanship. That's danger that you really need to look out for. When Jesus finally enters your reality, your life, your sailing voyage, your boat, your life, let that moment be a place of worship and confession. Confess that Jesus is truly the Son of God. Humbly receive him into your life, into your boat, and name him captain. When you do, he will make you the fisher of men. Becoming the fisher of men is an honorable and glorious thing. It's like being knighted, in a sense. But I hope this isn't the most case for the most culture and language, but I find this imagery often overlooked, underappreciated, or misinterpreted, because, especially if you're Korean. Because for Korean, to fish, nakda, is an idiom for successfully fooling someone, successfully tricking someone. The word fish is exactly the same as the word hook. So it's used to express a successful alluring, scamming, or trickery. And even in a global sense, the phrase "fisher of men" is employed, though positively, as if where humans are seen and represented as fishes. Early Christians used the symbol of fish to communicate and tell each other to identify themselves as fellow Christians. And if you think a lot with metaphorical images like me, this imagery is easy to misinterpret in the modern sense because it feels like being a fisher of men, focusing on the concept of fish, it feels like you're pulling people out of their natural habitat. I personally find this very important to clarify. When Jesus calls us to be the fisher of men, he's calling us to be part of his crew of salvation. Fish as an aquatic creature isn't the point. We're not forcing fish out of this natural dwelling place. We're saving the drowned souls from the place where they're dead and dying and should have never belonged. If you look at the original Greek, the phrase fisher of men is actually halies anthropon. Anthropon meaning man, anthropology, as in anthropology. Halies is what gets translated as fisher, but actual etymology means has plus is. Eus means person concerned. Haus means either salt or sea. So accurate translation would be either a seaman, sailor, or man of salt. This nuanced translation had to go with the fisher because back then, way before Columbus, we didn't exactly have a large-scale expedition or exploration. There was a bit of a trade going on, but not that actively. There wasn't exactly Pirates of Caribbeans happening here. So if you're a sailor, you're a fisherman. And so the picture of rescuing the drowned was overlapped with fishing. Sorry about the tangent. This causes a lot of conceptual misnuance understanding, and I felt it was necessary to clarify. Back to the point. When Jesus saved the command of the impossible and the raising hand, accompanying you and entering your boat, your reality, being the true captain of your life's voyage, you're given a new calling to be part of his crew, to fish, pull up, and save the souls from the world, its deep, chaotic waters. When we receive the command to join Jesus' crew, becoming fisher of men, nowhere at any point are we deemed humans as fishes. We are not forcing poor creatures out of their natural habitat. We recognize the reality of humanity without Christ. Humans cannot survive the waters and do not belong there. They are the drowned, held in the dark, sunken and crushed by the weight of their sins, unable to swim. The boasting kind will proudly proclaim that humanity can overcome the darkness and the weight, and saying that they can and should adapt in the waters. We find this in the language of modernism and its philosophy, seeking to become a superhuman, Ubermensch. In this case, I guess a mermaid of some kind. If a soul rejects the saving hand and chooses to stay in the abyss, the soul stays. Forever crushed by the weight of the chaos, the formless, orderless, and meaningless waters. But we Christians must see clearly and witness Christ revealed in a confused world. Light of the world came to us to command the impossible possible. The King of Kings came to be our captain, and under his order, we must stand as sailors among the oarless, rescuing them, fishing them, and inviting them to join the crew of Christ. See clearly for the Christ revealed. Answer the call of courage by seeking the command of grace, and be saved by the hand of the Lamb. Receive Jesus into your boat and name him captain. You will be sailors and crewmates of the Most High, saving the drowned, participating in the glory of the one who can truly tame the waters. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks.